Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Canada's Real Deal. I'm your host, Anuj, and I'm a real estate broker in the Greater Toronto Area.
And my name's Anika Dogra, and I'm a mortgage agent level 2 in Ontario.
Today, we're going to be discussing the biggest news of the year, the result of the U.S. election. So I'm just going to start off by saying these are just our opinions, and we're just presenting the info as we see it. Not necessarily all of our opinions, but mostly factual and what we think will happen based on the knowledge that we've gathered and what we know about the economy. But we're going to be talking directly how the U.S. results impact the Canadian real estate economy.
Yeah, so there's a general belief amongst investors that Trump's victory will affect mortgage rates because of the bond yields, right? And so what they're expecting to happen is that the bond yields will rise because he's proposed tax cuts and he's proposed tariffs, right? And so specifically the tax cuts, when they hear that, they're not sure how America is going to be able to continue to reduce its deficit or how it's going to make payments. So creditworthiness is in question, especially in a time like this where every 3 months the deficit's going up by $1 trillion, and that's going to go down to 2 months, eventually 1 month. So investors are expecting that bond yields will have to go up in order to account for America's risky creditworthiness.
And honestly, it's been less than a week and we've already seen that trend happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start just explaining what a tariff is for those of you who don't know. A tariff is a tax imposed by the government on imported goods and services from another country. So this is in an attempt to increase domestic spending on domestically produced products. It's also another way for the government to generate some revenue, and it promotes people like manufacturing companies to produce domestic goods.
Yeah, and so Trump has said that the way that they're going to continue to attack that deficit is they're going to get that money from tariffs. And the other side of that is that they don't, well, I guess investors don't really believe that the amount that they're going to get from tariffs, even if they raise it by 20%, 60%, whatever, it's not going to become close to how much they need to actually attack that deficit. So they're not expecting that to be a really strong plan. But he believes that bringing those tariffs in will, we're laughing already, he believes that bringing those tariffs in will get people to like buy more domestically and then get more money that way.
She's laughing because I call him Tariff Trump. So that's what she's thinking in her head.
Yeah, I want to see you do the impression and call him Tariff Trump.
Tariff Trump.
Okay, you suck. Okay, so anyways, being more serious, Americans are obviously anxious about their financial situation, right?
Yeah, and I think they have reason to be anxious, but honestly, we're not in the position that the States is. So I think for our economy, it definitely would hurt us more than it would help us. Because a lot of people are thinking that since he's imposing tariffs on all international imports, that gives Canada an opportunity to step in, or maybe other countries will start coming to us or removing the States as the middleman. And maybe that means building those connections for Canada without relying on the States. But I don't think that will happen just because it's only a 4-year term. So do I see global players setting up trade deals with us just for 4 years? And it's expensive to kind of reroute and figure out your distribution line.
Yeah. And it just also comes down to what do we have an absolute advantage in, right? Like we're not going to, it doesn't make sense to change what kind of industries we're doing. Well, I mean, it does make sense in some areas, but we're not going to be able to even for America, they're not going to be able to produce everything that they're going to claim that they want to produce. They're running a trade deficit. So that's why they're saying that we want to be exporting more rather than importing as much as we are, specifically from China. But they just don't have the ability to provide everything that they're thinking that they're going to be able to do. And then what's going to end up happening is that they're going to enable China to make more relationships with other countries around the world and probably just make China a more powerful global player, or at least that's what people are expecting.
That's what I think is going to happen. I understand his logic because he thinks that will promote manufacturers in the States to start building factories here and producing everything, which means more jobs for Canadians, which means they have more purchasing power, but that also means more inflation. That also means an increased cost of the same good if it's produced domestically, because the States cannot compete with countries like Mexico that have very low minimum wage standards, right? So ultimately, I think the cost is going to go onto the domestic consumer or the domestic manufacturer. And a lot of economists would agree with me, because most economists say that it'll increase the average American household spending by $2,600 a year just by imposing tariffs.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So the other thing I think is that once he's realized that that tariffs are not a tax on another country, he's kind of switched it up and said that how tariffs are going to work is that it's going to incentivize these other foreign companies to start building their factories in America to avoid those tariffs. And that should bring more industry to America, more jobs to America. But I think that will probably still contribute to inflation, right? Their employment levels are pretty low. I mean, unemployment is pretty low, right? So they're at a healthy place already when it comes to unemployment. So bringing more jobs here, I don't know. I think that would just raise inflation as well.
Yeah, the problem is for us, we do worse in our unemployment rate than the States. We do worse in inflation rate. That's why this year, historically, we always followed the States and what they did when they dropped rates. We tended to follow. But now this year, we haven't been doing that just because our economy has kind of split up a bit. We kind of have to make our own decisions. So if this continues to happen and inflation is increasing in the States, we're forced to decrease our rates, which I think might further the unaffordability crisis for Canadian homes.
The other side of that is that if bond yields are going up, then the fixed rates are going to go up, right? But if inflation's going up, then the prime rate also will have to go up, right, as well to fight inflation. Right now, Canada's inflation's going down. So I think we can expect that the prime rate's going to definitely keep going down into 2025, right? So the fixed rates and the prime rate should balance out soon enough so that they're kind of more competitive with each other. And then Canadians should have have more options between fixed rates and variable rates about which option to use when they're buying homes. But it also depends on how strong our currency is, right?
Well, what I see happening is the US dollar going down because of these tariffs and his policies. The other thing is that tied with his immigration policies, right? There might be an influx of immigrants coming into Canada now, right? Which means further housing shortage for Canadians. Rental prices might continue to go up then. And then again, we have to produce more houses than we can to keep up with the demand.
So then if the currency is changing, what do we think is going to happen in terms of foreign investment into Canada? Especially specifically into housing, right? If our currency is weak, won't that mean that there's going to be more foreign investors because they're getting more value for their buck to invest into Canada? Do you think that's going to happen?
But remember, Canada is not imposing tariffs like that on other countries, right? So we want people to be purchasing from us and purchasing elsewhere, right? So we don't necessarily want our dollar to be weakened because then it has less purchasing power globally. Right? So if we're positioning ourselves to get rid of the middleman, the States, I would think we would want a higher value for our dollar just so that we gain that advantage globally when we're trading, that our dollar is worth more and can purchase more from whoever, an exporter, right?
But at the expense of us losing foreign investment.
Yes.
Okay. So then that leaves the question of if we're getting less foreign investment, we can't rely on that strategy to get housing built in Canada, right?
No.
We've got to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
We've got to invest ourselves into more affordable housing. We've got to invest into or figure out a way to streamline getting development happening in Canada so that we're actually building those houses faster.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you think that's likely to happen?
Most of the platforms have already swayed that direction where they want to cut down the red tape and remove municipal restrictions on buildings so that it's faster. Our election isn't until next year. So either way, whatever party wins, both of them have that in their platform. So I'm not worried about that. It's just if the immigration policy for ours and the immigration influx from the states doesn't match up, I still think it's kind of mission impossible. We'll never meet those targets.
Yeah. So I guess since we're talking about the election next year, we tend to follow American trends. Do you think we're going to follow their trend to vote on economy? I think it's pretty obvious. We will vote based on the condition of our economy next year.
Yeah. So in the American election, that was the number one topic, and it's the same for Canada.
Yeah.
So I think people are fed up, and even in the polls right now, it's basically a year ahead, but it's leaning more conservative.
Yeah. And do you think that because the Liberals will recognize that we don't want to hear things about social welfare programs, we're not in that place to hear those types of things right now. We want to figure out how are we going to make groceries more affordable? How are we going to afford our gas? How are we going to afford our mortgages? Those are the things that we want to hear about. So I think the Liberals are probably going to have to shift their platform towards that as well, right? To focus more on those issues and focus more on the economy rather than like the fluffy stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's what's going to win somebody an election.
Yeah. So
which we will talk about in our next podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to talking about what is likely going to happen with China specifically with these tariffs. And I think a good place to look at that would be to see what happened in his first term.
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2016, he introduced tariffs then as well.
Yeah.
Right. Specifically on China. And that at that point, the trade deficit started to shrink. Right. So it was kind of working. America wasn't in as such of a weak position as it was before. Right. And then so that worked, I guess, from that metric. And then Biden expanded those tariffs. And that trade deficit shrinked to the smallest it's ever been under Biden, by the way, not under Trump, under Biden. But then basically what happened was China, realizing that it's not in as strong of a position as it was before, it had to become emboldened. And so they started investing more in their domestic industries. One of those things being like technology, right?
Yeah.
They've started exporting a lot of like these 3D printers and high machine tools. That's kind of what they've become better at, along with EV, right?
Yes.
So they've expanded and grown those industries within their country. So it's like, was it worth it, right? Did America in that time get a chance to become like the world or global leader in any of those industries or in any other kind of high-tech industry?
I think what Trump was thinking would happen was that all these countries would just start crumbling and groveling at their feet. But instead what happened is, when you start a tariff war, they're going to start it back, right? So they started imposing tariffs on American goods as well. So, and producing domestically. So now China, for example, their EV cars are crazy. And if you see the stocks for them, they've grown I think it's 50% in just this year, right? So if there's no need for American goods now too, you just lost your biggest consumer.
Yeah, that's like a really good point. And well, it's international relations as well, right? They've also, not only have they tried to reduce the amount of exports coming in from China, they're also controlling what we import or what we export. Sorry, not we, what Americans export to China, right?
Yeah.
So they don't want to export certain high tech goods to China because they don't want China to get their hands on that technology and then, improve their military. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But then by doing that and emboldening China and having China invest in itself more, whereas China was 10 years behind in maybe semiconductor technology or microchips, they've started to catch up. They're not so many years behind America anymore. Right. So that kind of undermines all the efforts that you put in, right? For your ultimate goal, it kind of undermines all of that, right? You've just made them get that fire in their belly to do more.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you're kind of starting this deglobalization trend, right? Across the globe now where people don't need to rely on you for parts or something. They can make the entire product at home.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are kind of tired of globalizing, so they're kind of for it. But it's just that in some things you have to look at the short-term gains, but I think you also have to balance that out with the long-term gains or the long-term consequences, right? And I don't think maybe a lot of people are the best at that because they're being told what to think for the short term, for the term that he's coming into power.
I mean, yeah, let's see how it plays out. We got 4 years ahead of us. So.
Yeah, but one more thing I think we have to mention is that if just like America is planning on deporting all these illegal immigrants, their cost of food's about to go up as well, right?
Yeah.
So those illegal migrants are kind of lubricating that U.S. economy, kind of similar to how international students that are working cash jobs are lubricating ours. So it really these things are going to have a long-term consequence on us and how much we're paying for things like food in the future as well. So we can expect inflation to probably start rising again in the future.
I mean, yeah, let's see what happens. Hopefully things go for the positive for Canada. That's what I'm wishing. And yeah.
Maybe we got to start thinking Canada first as well.
Thank you so much for watching and tuning in. We got a lot more coming up, so make sure you subscribe.
And make sure to like and comment under the video. We want to hear from you and hear what your opinions are as well.